In 1932, the US government began a study on syphilis in black men, without their informed consent, and continued it for 40 years. The Tuskegee study remains one of the most cited cases of research ethics gone catastrophically wrong.
The question this raises isn't just historical. It's one researchers, universities, and funding bodies grapple with every day. Where does the pursuit of knowledge end and moral responsibility begin?
Welcome back to Advanced English in Context. Today we are stepping into the world of academic debate, a register that demands precision, nuance, and the ability to argue a position while acknowledging counterarguments.
Academic English at C1 is not about complicated words for their own sake. It's about making complex ideas accessible without sacrificing rigor. That's a genuinely difficult skill.
In today's conversation, two professors debate the ethical limits of dual-use research, science that has both beneficial and potentially harmful applications.
As you listen, pay attention not just to the vocabulary, but to how each speaker structures their argument, the concessions, the pivots, and the rhetorical strategies at play.
I'll be Professor Hargrove, a bioethicist. Sarah, you're Professor Chen, a molecular biologist.
Professor Hargrove, I understand your reservations about gain-of-function research, but I'd push back on the idea that ethical oversight as it currently stands is sufficient to manage the risks.
Fascinating that you'd frame it that way, Professor Chen. My contention isn't that oversight is sufficient. It's that without any oversight, we are essentially conducting experiments on society without its consent.
That's a rhetorically powerful framing, but it conflates regulatory oversight with societal consent. These are distinct concepts with very different institutional implications.
You're right that they're conceptually distinct, and I'll grant you that. But the gap between what regulators approve and what the public would sanction, were they fully informed, is an empirical question we rarely even ask.
Agreed, and that gap is troubling. But the answer surely cannot be to put every research protocol to a public referendum. Most people lack the technical literacy to evaluate virological risk.
And there's the elitism that always lurks beneath this debate. Trust the experts is fine until the experts have a vested interest in the outcome of their own research.
That's a fair critique, and I won't pretend conflicts of interest don't exist in academia. But let's be precise. What mechanism are you actually proposing? Ethics boards already exist.
Ethics boards are largely reactive and often underfunded. What I'm advocating for is anticipatory governance, embedding ethicists into research teams from day one, not as an afterthought.
Now that I can get behind. Embedding ethicists upstream, before research directions are set, could fundamentally alter the moral landscape of scientific inquiry. That's not a pipe dream. It's being piloted in several European institutions.
Exactly. And it changes the dynamic entirely. Instead of ethicists acting as gatekeepers who might slow research, they become co-architects of the scientific process.
I'll admit that reframing is quite compelling. The gatekeeper model breeds adversarialism. A collaborative model could transform the relationship between science and ethics entirely.
Which is ultimately the goal, not to constrain science, but to ensure that when we push the boundaries of knowledge, we do so with our eyes wide open.
Let's break down key expressions from this debate. First, I'll grant you that. This is one of the most elegant concession phrases in academic English. It acknowledges a valid point without abandoning your broader argument.
Related expressions include "I'll concede that point" or "you raise a fair objection." These signal intellectual honesty and actually strengthen your credibility as a debater.
Next, conflates. Professor Chen accused Hargrove of conflating two distinct concepts. In academic debates, conflating is a logical error. It's combining things that should be kept separate.
Vested interest is another must-know expression. If someone has a vested interest, their judgment may be compromised by personal gain. In academic writing, you might say the researchers had a vested interest in positive outcomes.
Finally, anticipatory governance. This is domain-specific vocabulary, but the concept transfers widely. Anytime you manage future risks proactively, you can describe that as an anticipatory approach.
Second conversation. A graduate student challenging a supervisor about data collection practices.
Professor Webb, I wanted to raise something I've been sitting with for a while. I'm concerned that some of our survey participants may not have fully understood what they were consenting to.
That's a serious allegation, Priya. Walk me through your reasoning. I want to understand exactly what you observed.
The consent form runs to 4 pages of dense legal language. When I administered it to participants last week, several of them skimmed it and signed within 30 seconds. I don't think that constitutes meaningful consent.
I appreciate you bringing this to me rather than going over my head. You're raising what's known as the consent theater problem, forms that are technically compliant but communicatively opaque.
Exactly. And if participants don't understand what they're consenting to, then our data is built on a shaky ethical foundation, regardless of whether we've ticked every regulatory box.
You're right, and this is something I've been meaning to address. Let's redesign the consent process, plain language summaries, a verbal confirmation step, and a genuine opportunity for questions before signing.
That would make a substantial difference. And for the data we've already collected, would it be appropriate to go back and reconsent participants?
In principle, yes. It's burdensome, but it's the right thing to do. I'll bring it to the Ethics Committee. Your instinct here, Priya, reflects exactly the kind of moral reasoning this field needs more of.
From the second conversation, sitting with something. This idiomatic expression captures the experience of holding a thought, concern, or feeling over time without acting on it immediately.
You might also say, I've been mulling this over, or this has been weighing on me. All three suggest something has been on your mind and deserves attention.
Ticked every regulatory box is a powerful phrase because it signals that formal compliance and genuine ethical conduct are not always the same thing. This distinction is crucial in law, medicine, and research.
And going over my head, Priya explicitly chose not to do this, which the professor acknowledged positively. Understanding organizational hierarchies and when to escalate is a sophisticated professional skill.
Slow repeat time. First phrase, that's a rhetorically powerful framing, but it conflates regulatory oversight with societal consent.
Break it down. Rhetorically powerful framing. 4 syllables on rhetorically, stress on why. Then conflates, conflates. Full phrase, that's a rhetorically powerful framing, but it conflates regulatory oversight with societal consent.
Next, without any oversight, we're essentially conducting experiments on society without its consent. Notice, essentially, as a hedge, it softens the claim while maintaining force.
Without any oversight, we are essentially conducting experiments on society without its consent. Now at natural pace, without any oversight, we are essentially conducting experiments on society without its consent.
Final phrase. I don't think that constitutes meaningful consent. Constitutes is a formal verb meaning amounts to or counts as. Practice. I don't think that constitutes meaningful consent.
Quiz time. Question 1. When Professor Hargrove says I'll grant you that, is he A, fully agreeing with Professor Chen, B, conceding a valid point while maintaining his broader argument, or C, changing his position?
The answer is B. I'll grant you that is a concession phrase. It acknowledges a valid counterpoint without abandoning your overall argument. It's a sign of intellectual strength, not weakness.
Question 2. Priya said the consent form was communicatively opaque. What does this mean? A. The form was too short. B. The form was technically correct but difficult to understand. Or C. The form was missing required information.
Answer. B. Communicatively opaque means that while the form may have been legally complete, its language was too complex for participants to truly understand. Compliance without clarity is not genuine consent.
Final question. What is anticipatory governance? A. Reviewing research after it's completed. B. Embedding ethics into research from the start. Or C. Publishing findings with ethical disclaimers.
The answer is B. Anticipatory governance means proactively addressing ethical considerations from the very beginning of the research process, not as a retrospective review.
Ethics and knowledge will always be in tension. That tension is productive, not paralyzing, if we engage with it honestly. Today's language gives you the tools to do exactly that.
Subscribe, share, and let us know in the comments what ethical dilemmas you've faced in professional or academic life. Next episode, Mental Health in the Workplace.
Until then, keep thinking critically and speaking precisely. See you in English 059.